begin in prayer, and Terry Leo is going to lead that.
Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for bringing us here each one safely. Be with our families as we proceed with your business, and give us wisdom, Father God. Thank you for the opportunity to serve on resolutions. It is a statement of beliefs and a solid rock and a solid foundation on which we want to proceed and promote. We thank you for the delegates that put into place the resolutions and the confidence that they have exhibited in us. And Father God, I just ask today too that you would Judge Kavanaugh, that you protect him, that you hold him up, that you hold him in the palm of your hand, and that the fiery darts against him will not harm him in any way, shape, or form. We thank you for the truth, and the goodness of your word, and we know that he can stand on the truth. And smile on him and let him know that you are hearing him every minute of this day and going forward through the hearings. And thank you for our lives and for the ability to serve you. And again, give us wisdom and believe in
Let's also remember Debbie Terry, who is traveling back from the National Prayer Conference. So she said she'd be praying for her safe travel back to Texas. And Linda, could you lead the pledge?
I pledge to the American flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And now the Texas flag.
Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible.
All right, welcome to the SREC Resolutions Committee. We've got a busy 2 years ahead of us. You know, the Resolutions Committee deals with a lot of important things. We're in charge of making recommendations for the policy of the party in between conventions. And another thing that we do that is really important is work on those ballot propositions in the primary. So we've got a big responsibility. I'm returning, and I guess this is my third time on the committee. And, you know, some of you are new and some of you are returnees, so we've got a mix of new experience and fresh blood, I guess. So let's establish a quorum now. So we're going to call the roll here. And Ashley's going to help me out with, yeah, let's call the roll.
Okay.
She's going to serve as temporary secretary.
Robert Kessin.
Here.
Jerry Fisher.
She's going to be right here.
Jerry Fisher. Jason Ross. I saw him earlier.
He's in rules.
He's in
Oh,
the
he's still
building.
in roles. Allison Winter.
Here.
Here. Anita Davidson. I have some. Terry Leo.
Here.
Debbie Terry's up here. David Halverson.
Here.
Virtual. Mark Lee.
Here.
Robert. Casillas.
Here.
Sam Dalton.
Here.
Ashley Sellers. Okay. Sam Bryant.
Here.
Okay. Stephen Broden. Linda Kenny. Here. Mark Dunham.
Dylan.
Britton Brooks. Britton Brooks.
All right, well, we do have a quorum. So I think we've got a little bit of time today. I don't want to get overboard with introductions, but I think just for everyone's benefit, we'll go around the room. I introduce myself. I'm Virgil Cruz. Again, this is the third time I'm on this committee, And I'm from Houston, SD 15, and I'm excited to work with all y'all. So we'll go around this way. So Bob?
Yeah, I'm Bob Kessig. I'm from SD1 up by Tyler Way, northeast part of the state. Susan Wells, my partner in that. And I'm really excited about being on the SREC and being involved in something like this for the first time.
Sam Dalton from Senate District 20, which is in Lexus County, Jim Wells, Brooks, and Pete Dazzle. They taught me to say it that way. And that's basically between the Oasis River and the Rio Grande.
Sam Bryant, Senate District 22. I currently reside in Tarrant County, and it stretches all the way from Bosque County, a small piece of Tarrant County, Johnson County, West County, and so forth. I'm looking forward to this. It's my first time around, and it makes a difference.
I'm Marvin Cleve from Southwest Houston, SD 17, which also includes parts of Fort Bend and Brazoria County. This is my fourth time on SREC, and I've enjoyed being on resolutions before. Started with Virgil, and it's a great opportunity to be involved in the key issues, and I'm looking forward to it again. Thank you.
And I'm Terry Leo from the Houston area, SD7, Mark Ramsey's cohort. And when I found out Virgil was chairing this committee, I just had to. No, I'm looking forward to it. I had a passion for words. I think words mean things, and especially in legislative bodies and within our party. And so I think those things are vitally important. Resolutions is like the doctrine of the church. It's a statement of beliefs and the things that we'll support. So I'm really excited to be on resolutions.
I'm Allison Winter, and I'm from Montgomery County, SD4, that covers down to Jefferson and Chambers, Galveston, and part of Harris County. I think that's all of it. But I'm happy to serve. I was on the platform committee for the state convention, and so I saw how important it was, and I thought this would be a good transition for the community.
I'm from SD10, SD5. We have 10 counties. We have 10 counties. We have 10 counties in SD5, so I do make that mistake occasionally. I live up in Georgetown, which is just a stick and a jump up the road. And this is my third term and first time to serve on resolutions.
I'm David Halverson. I'm technically on my fourth term, but I skipped one in 2012. Debbie Terry is my partner. We're up in Tarrant County and Denton County, and served on resolutions in the past, and happy to be back. And I'm also a candidate for officials committee coming up tomorrow.
I'm Robert Casillas. This is my first term on the SREC. I'm from SD19, and big victory.
Good job, Ron.
That victory is so important. Rush was talking about it on Wednesday, so it's awesome. Again, I'm new. I live in a little town called Somerset, southwest Bexar County. Retired infantry officer. I raise cattle and do volunteer work. I volunteered to serve on this committee, so I'm glad I'm here, and also serve on the Legislative Affairs Committee. I look forward to working with all of you.
Ashley Stokes, SD22. First time SREC. First time qualified for some of this committee, so I'm also on Leg Affairs. Been active in politics since 2012. So, happy to be here serving.
Mark Dunham, SD29, retired Army Intel officer. This is my third term. Second term, or second time on resolutions at the convention, both here on the SREC. So looking forward to working with them all.
I'm Linda Kenny. I'm from SD25, which is a 6-county district. It's Senator Donna Campbell's district. We have all of Carmel, all of Kendall, part of Hayes, part of Guadalupe, part of Travis, and part of Bexar County. So it's kind of centrally located here. I live in Dripping Springs. We like to refer that as just west of Weird. And I'm happy to serve on this committee. I'm also running for the officials committee tomorrow. We'll see how that plays out. Looking forward to it.
And looping back.
Oh, I'm sorry. Jerry Fisher from SD2, which is
outside of Dallas, Rockwall County, Wood County, not Wood County, sorry, that's you. Hopkins, Hyde, Kaufman, Fannin. This is my first time on the SREC. I've been very active forever. And I think I'm excited about resolutions, but.
You look excited.
Resolutions is the one to be on today.
That's all I have to say.
Yeah, okay.
So I wanted to review real quick here what the bylaws say that we're supposed to do. Let's make sure that we know what we are. So unless rules is changing it today, Article 7 talks about committees, and Section 8 the duties of the standing committees. So we're to be comprised of no fewer than 5. So we've got 19, which is a full committee. A lot of brain power on this committee. So we're nominated, we've been confirmed. Number 2, it shall be the duty of the Resolutions Committee to recommend policy positions of the party on any issue brought before it, subject to the approval of the SREC, and to recommend changes in the party platform to the temporary platform and Resolutions Committee of the next biennial state convention. So I've heard other chairmen in the past, I think Eric Obiella was the chair the first time I served, and Mark Ramsey the one term that I wasn't on resolutions, and then Candy Noble in the immediate past term. And everybody has a little different philosophy. One of those chairs at the opening resolutions meeting said, the purpose of resolutions committee is to kill resolutions. Now I don't feel that way. I think it is important that we remember that we're someone else put it very wisely, that we're the children of the parent. The parent is the delegates that brought us here, the platform that we represent, and we need to think of those things, in my opinion. Anytime we consider a resolution, I think one or more of you should probably say, what does the platform say about this? Because ultimately that's the document that we're bound by, that we need to carry forward. Of course, there are going to be things that come up that are tangential to that. You know, they're not exactly word for word something that comes up in the platform that we ought to consider, in my view, the spirit of the platform when we look at those things. But we also may want to make sure we're not being redundant. So if the platform speaks to an issue and we're just repeating it word for word, we need to consider if that's something that we want to do. There may be time and place to do that, and that's up to the group of us to decide. So as I mentioned a little bit ago, we also take the primary responsibility on the primary ballot propositions. So we've got, you know, a year to think of those, but it'll be here before you know it. So keep your eyes and ears open to things that you think we need to test against our electorate, our primary voters, because those resolutions can have a lot of impact on the legislature. So and then to make sure that people don't just move resolutions on Saturday without coming through us first, someone has referred to this as the gatekeeper provision. I think it was, Marvin, you can remind me if you remember, I think it actually was written into the bylaws maybe our first term.
Yes, I think that's probably right.
So if you'll read it on there, you can see that. I'll just summarize it, that if someone doesn't bring us a resolution, or if they bring it to us and it fails, they can't just bring it up on Saturday without suspending the rules. So that does give us some responsibility when people say, oh, you know, I might have it ready by resolutions committee time, or maybe not. Just remind them that if not, they have a higher threshold, that it's better for us to do the debate on Friday and get through the nitty gritty and all the wordsmithing if possible. And that way we don't have to have so many floor amendments, and we can be more efficient on Saturday. So the more we can do in here, the better. All right. So I wanted, I think the next thing on my agenda is the election of a secretary. So I need someone to volunteer as tribute. Are there any nominations for secretary? And just to relieve the burden on the secretary, it's been committee practice that the secretary doesn't sort of track all of the debates, so it wouldn't remove you necessarily from all the discussion. The secretary is just going to take the minutes of what we passed, who was there, we don't need to talk about, okay, this person had, we had discussion on this amendment. Those are not necessary things in Roberts, so minutes can be pretty bare bone. And we'll track the resolution language, so the secretary wouldn't have to track all the, the commas and periods and all the fun stuff that we do. So, no one wants to make eye contact.
Hey Virgil, if it helps, Chris Howe just reminded the Legislative Affairs Committee that you don't even have to really take minutes, it's just notes.
There you go. So,
Okay,
all right, we've got a nomination. And second, and I'll share with you past. I can give you a template. Gail,
just remember, I have rheumatoid arthritis, so I am not the fastest typer in the world.
as long as you're keeping notes on the general stuff, and
Okay.
I usually redundantly keep track of things, and Ashley will be here, I think, to help you as well.
It was probably the prayer.
I'll give you the template too that Gail Stannard used in the
Awesome.
last,
That'll
and
work.
she had a really great simple format.
Okay.
So we've got a nomination. Are there any other nominations for secretary?
I think that's a unanimous.
All right, let's vote. All those in favor of Terry Leo as committee secretary, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, say no. Congratulations
so
for
much.
our sympathies.
Remember, the secretary said.
Don't abuse your secretary, please.
All right.
Did someone just walk in?
No.
Jerry Fisher came in at
Well, I'm gonna mark her.
2:29.
Sorry I'm late, sorry I'm late, guys,
All
sorry
right,
I'm late.
Britton Brooks.
sir.
Britton, introduce yourself.
Hi, Britton Brooks, 30, SD 30.
Right here, thanks. And did you get a packet?
Oh, all right.
Since we need a bigger table or a bigger room.
All right, I wanted to talk now about standing rules.
Oh, okay.
Virgil?
Brooks.
Yes.
What packet?
Oh, I think it's only one page. It's
Oh, I have the agenda.
it's the agenda and the resolution.
Oh, okay.
That's on the
secret note.
I cannot agree more.
You said packet.
That's it?
It's not much of a packet.
It's a small town today.
That's all we get?
What's on the screen right now is not something that you have in paper form in front of you, but it is something that I wanted us to consider possibly, and it's the standing rule that we've used for 2 cycles now at least. I'll read it for the benefit, or Linda, can you read the no resolution?
The no resolution will be considered by the committee that has not been distributed to the committee chair in a standard electronic format by 6 p.m. Wednesday before a 12 noon Friday committee meeting and copied or subsequently forwarded by the chair ASAP to the members.
Can you turn around and plug that cord back in behind you? Okay, maybe that'll work.
Well, we got most of it.
I apologize. I stepped on the cord and I guess it came out of the wall.
Okay, we're back in business.
This committee rule may be suspended by majority vote of committee members present and voting.
All right, so I did want, before we start debating this, and we don't have to have any standing rules, we could be without rules, but I think 2 reasons for this is that you make sure that the members of this committee have time to see things. It's sort of respect for the other members of the committee. And also, I believe the staff printing deadline is typically the noon on Wednesday. So if we were to use this language that was used in 2014 through 2016, that actually wouldn't work well for printing purposes. So I want to throw it to you guys, and I'll take a motion if somebody has a motion, keeping in mind that we do have an earlier staff printing deadline than we used to.
So moved.
All right, Sam, what's your, is it for 11:59 Tuesday?
Hey, whatever you want for.
That would be
Well-
11, that would be 11.
Yes, that's
Just
dangerous.
say,
That's dangerous.
Oh, you're talking about minute before midnight Tuesday night.
Right,
Is that what-
so if someone got it in, and I didn't make it midnight, because then people said, you mean midnight of the day before or the new day? So, if we were to say 11:59 PM Tuesday, that's 12 hours before the printing deadline, and I would get it to you guys.
And I'll second that,
So Sam, it's for an 11:59.
Tuesday night.
Okay, let me get the language on the screen.
Virtually, you're gonna give me a copy of all this. too, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And I'm following it.
Awesome.
Just, I said just for today.
What?
No guarantees.
What are we
Yeah, no
called?
promises.
Yeah, what are we called?
And I guess 12 o'clock noon Friday, is there any objection to just saying before a Friday committee meeting?
Yes.
Because the time may be
yes,
subject to
We'll
change.
move around.
exactly.
So that's the language that we are considering. Is there any discussion?
I think it's a wonderful idea.
Standing rule number one, we'll take a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. All right, let me give you a little background on possible number two. So, in the previous term, we had this rule that, well, it wasn't a rule, we actually moved it at most meetings, that we gave Candy Noble the authority to make, you know, sometimes you adjourn and you have weird spacing or weird commas or inconsistent fonts or inconsistent spacing or whatever. In most cases in the last term, we gave Candy discretion to, and normally she and I and Gail Stannard and sometimes other people with posse, and we would make sure that we were happy with what came out of here. We were very careful not to make substantive formatting adjustments.
I think we need to make a motion to sit there and continue with that rule.
And I thought of, because I'm complicated, so I thought of alternatives. So this would be the language if you wanted to make it a standing rule. We don't have to make it a standing rule. We could never do it, or we could do it on a meeting by meeting basis. If you wanted to make like I know the state convention had a subcommittee for punctuation and spelling or whatever. If you guys want to do that, I will promise to you that if you make this a standing rule, I'll make sure that I recruit at least one of you to have double eyes on me so that I'm not making a determination about something being substantive or not. Mark?
I'd like to make a motion to make that a standing rule.
Would you like this language, the
Version A.
I think that's reasonable. I would second that.
okay, and it's my commitment to y'all that I will make sure that I announce when I'm gonna do that and where I'm gonna do that, so that if anybody else has issues about what's substantive or not, that we're all on the same page.
Virgil's the expert on that, basically.
Yeah.
Language and grammar and all that good stuff.
For you new folks, let me tell you,
Yeah.
normally he does it
Virgil's on
anyway.
top of it.
Right.
On Saturday, if it's not squared away, so.
All right, so we have a motion on the floor. We've had discussion. Is there any other discussion? Let's proceed to a vote. So this would be standing rule number two. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. All right, are there any other standing rules that anyone would like to propose?
I don't know if it should be a standing rule, but in the past, we've had kind of a format that we have issued to all the members, actually, I think, to all the SREC members, just to give them some guidance on what you should keep in mind when you issue.
I think it'd be wise to distribute a format for us to send to people, or if someone comes and approaches us and says, well, what's the format, that we can do it. You know, we had two that were introduced this time, and they were done properly. They looked good. There was not a lot of cleaning up to be done to put them in a standardized format. So I think I could work with the secretary on that, unless y'all wanted to publish one today, or we could bump it to December. But if you like, we could create a format and just make sure that it's available.
Mr. Chairman, like a couple times back when Mark Ramsey was doing it, I think he had basically a format for how to, we had check boxes and how the thing had progressed through, from introduction through debate.
Right.
So, something like that.
Yeah, he did, he had a very formal process, and in the last term, we were a little more informal about it, so, if this committee would like to do it more formally, I think that perhaps creates additional burdens on
I'm not really
paperwork.
suggesting it, I'm just saying, okay, in deference to that.
Right.
That is where we're looking at.
I was just gonna say, is there,
providing that format.
aren't there enough existing resolutions already formatted from the past, you can look on the website and see?
Yeah, I think maybe we might be doing more work than we have to,
Yeah, I'm just
but
saying,
it may,
just defining
it may be
example.
helpful also to be able to say, well, this is a standard format. So
Didn't Gail have a template sort of from last time?
we did, and we didn't really,
Didn't really use
we
it that
used it
much
because we followed the template,
Yeah.
but we didn't use the template per se.
extensively.
Going through each
Yeah.
one, yeah.
Maybe the committee would like to recommend that we work up just a real simple template
And come back next time.
and come back next
look at
time.
it. That would probably be good.
Robert?
I have a question again, being new, when you start receiving resolutions, or might we expect some before December, or might be wise to do it sooner so the rest of the members can have the format?
Yeah, the only drawback to that this group wouldn't be approving the template, but if you'd like to.
We could maybe send out some simple guidelines and then formalize it at our next meeting. I mean, for the time being, I mean, we can just send maybe some guidelines informally, and then we'll formalize it.
And instead of waiting till December, and again, I just came out of legislative affairs, they plan to do a teleconference every 2 weeks, so if you prepare something, send it out, and we can have a teleconference, yeah, this is good, and then get it out, and we won't have to wait till December.
Or perhaps if someone would like to suggest, allowing, you could empower the secretary or a committee of people to do that. I don't think it's too controversial to sort of show resolutions templates.
No,
Do
not too
we
controversial.
have one that Gail has, you said that Gail had?
I have it somewhere. I don't have it
I didn't know
easily
if you had it
available.
readily available to show
Yeah, I'm
us.
not sure what it is.
Mr. Chairman, do you think it might be appropriate if we are, maybe at our next meeting, that we present that to the body, but proceed informally today with the ones that you have?
Look, I think that's sensible. Is there any objection to doing it that way? And we'll work out a template for formal consideration in December. Note to self.
Can I just make a suggestion?
Sam, go ahead.
Next legislative session starts right after the first of the year. If we can get the word out to our grassroots, if they got a burning issue, they better get it in as a resolution real quick. So it can be considered
Well,
certainly. at the next
that's a
meeting.
good point, Sam, because, once legislation, session jumps in, it's tough to bring new stuff. I mean, it becomes more difficult.
And just again, because I just came out of that committee, and that committee are saying, hey, we need to have all these whatever we're gonna present prior to even the start of it, so that's why I think if we're gonna have a format, it's best to send it out to our people, as soon as possible, and whatever it is. To me, it doesn't matter what it is, just as long as we get it out there,
Dave?
We basically, as Robert said, we have a window of basically 2 meetings. We've got the meeting before, which is December, the one before the legislative session, and then we've got the mid-legislative session window for things that are ongoing in March. So folks need to be probably aware of those 2 specific windows for getting a resolution through from the RDT.
Here's a thought. If we pass a resolution today, and it's to our satisfaction, could we use that as the template?
That's what I was saying, if you have one that you've already done, you've already got a template.
And that way we don't have to adopt something separately. We've got something that's already in place that we've already approved it in a concrete way.
Use this guideline.
You can do it in a sort of abstract way, that here's your guideline for resolutions. Is there a motion or any objection to doing it that way?
I'll make that motion, Mr. Chairman.
All right, so we've got a motion to use any resolutions passed today as the template to distribute as a suggested format.
Tell me your name again.
Mark Dunham, SD 29.
I'll second that.
He wants you to vote for him and put a piece of paper.
That's right, I saw that head on there. Okay, now I recognize it.
All right, so we've got a motion on the floor and a second. Is there any discussion for the motion? Okay, to restate the motion, this would use any resolutions passed today by the committee as a template to distribute as a suggested format for people to submit resolutions. All right, let's proceed to a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. All right. So I think we've dispensed with all the organizational stuff. Is there any other thing that would fall under rules of procedure?
Mr. Chairman, one thing I'd like to suggest is maybe that we do an after-action review of what happened during the platform committee, in dealing with the resolutions, so that we can kind of clean up the battlefield. There were some things that happened, that we really shouldn't have happened, and, some things, that need to get cleaned up. And as discussed on the convention floor by the chairman and to the floor, explaining that we probably need to have an after-action review and kind of deal with those issues to make sure that things go more smoothly in the next convention.
Do you mean with regard to platform committee or platform voting?
Platform committee, there were some issues with some of the subcommittee reports that were actually voted on at the subcommittee. Somehow got changed when it went to the main body. There were actually, at one point, it was kind of embarrassing, the chairman, Mark Ramsey, was kind of embarrassed as well. But we're all standing there discussing a particular, because someone was on the internet actually making a change to the resolution, and it wasn't the secretary. Mark basically goes, this is being live streamed to everybody. Is everybody else seeing this? There were some adaptions, and we need to make sure that we can't have that kind of thing happen.
I guess the question I would have, recognizing that there were some issues there, whether that's really in the domain of this committee, or if that has to do with organizing the convention and different, I'm not sure exactly in my mind how much our jurisdiction would apply to setting up that committee.
I have that question too. We'll go Tripp and then David.
Okay, I guess I'm looking for clarification here. You specifically talked about the Cook censorship that was on the resolution?
No.
That was not published, and then all of a sudden it came back online?
Well, there were several issues that came up. I discussed, when they came up, I went offline and spoke with the chairman who was Mark Ramsey, who was running it. He recognized that, there was a few problems, that occurred. I don't know that we need to go into the laundry list detail right now, because I'm not sure, maybe listening to the chairman, maybe he doesn't feel
No,
like this falls
I've
into our
received
purview.
a bunch of phone calls in regards to the Cook censorship. I was like, well, no, that's on there. I've seen it on there before, and, I had numerous of calls about it. But the way it got back to me was Mark had somebody working on it. I didn't know who that was, or
Right, well, this is the first time that we sit there and kind of use the Google thing where folks were making the changes, where anybody could sit there and make the changes. The problem is that folks were making changes while the whole committee's actually meeting on the actual document. While we're having this, we haven't even discussed it yet, and somebody's making the changes right on the actual document. You can't have that. The only people who should be making any change to any resolution is the secretary by the direction of what is voted on in the
That is
committee.
problematic. Chair recognizes David
With you, yes, the Religion Committee does have the purview to make recommendations to the Convention Platform Committee going forward.
Yes.
As we move into the convention planning period, so those things could be, we could actually make some.
Yeah, here's the language again that would govern what we can do. So, we can recommend a policy position of the party, which I don't know that a convention format would fall under that clause. And to recommend changes in the party platform, are we talking about platform or are we talking about mechanics?
I'm not talking about, yes.
We're talking about the procedure and the mechanics.
Thank you, it's more procedure than, I'm not changing party platform, period.
So this may not be something that falls directly under this language. I think it's a great idea. I think that needs to be explored. I'm wondering if maybe it falls under convention arrangements, or if it falls under, maybe it doesn't fall under anything.
Well,
Maybe
that's
follow
why,
the chairman.
in my humble opinion, Mr. Chairman, that's why I'm bringing it here, because I think really, let's face it, that's what we're all working toward, is working on the platform and working from the platform, and that's our basis of what we're gonna be doing for the 2 years after that.
Okay, Bob?
Yeah, I would say it pertains to the platform committee, just like we just, got Ms. Leo to be the secretary. Between you and the secretary, I think that's you're supposed to conduct this meeting without people changing what's already been written.
Right.
So wouldn't the platform committee with the chair and their secretary be responsible for that?
But we don't govern the platform committee. All we can do is recommend changes.
No.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Which sounds like
I'm saying-
our job is to look at the planks of the platform, the policies.
Policy
Yeah,
positions.
Positions.
that's what I'm
Yeah.
saying, exactly, Virgil, is that the platform chairman, the platform committee secretary should police their own stuff,
Right,
just
well,
like we're doing.
In
I
conjunction
think-
with the state chair.
I think the SREC can certainly make recommendations to a platform committee. The question for this body is whether it actually falls under our purview, or if it's something we need to investigate. In my view, I don't think it falls under the language that 2 allows us to do. But I think we've recognized that there is an issue that needs to be talked about and addressed by the right people. The question is, who are the right people?
Mark, were you on platform?
Oh, yeah.
I wasn't, but our guy from our district, Roman Klein, was a subcommittee chair, and maybe we could find a few key people on the resolutions committee, maybe Mark could help suggest,
Morgan Graham
Yeah.
would be one.
and get some of those people together and put their head together,
And this
and
that was
come
me.
back with some thoughts to us, and we can decide whether it's our committee, or whether it's party organization, or rules.
Well, if
That's
I,
the employment process, not the actual what is stated in our platform.
All-
We're talking about the
Ashley, and
process.
then we'll go Mark.
all I'm suggesting is that we provide some kind of standard operating procedure, for lack of a better term. I'm a military guy, forgive me. But to the platform committee, so that they're not starting from ground zero. That's my recommendation.
Say that one more time.
I'm suggesting that we create or supply the platform committee with a standard operating procedure, so that they're not starting from ground zero when they're trying to put this. Now, I will say, some of the things that Mark Ramsey did this time were, I thought, very good, as far as how we kind of organized and sectioned off based on senatorial committees on how we were gonna divide up the different subsections. I thought that was useful. I thought that was a very slick move to do, because it makes so much more sense when you're dealing with the legislature. But some of the, it should be there should only be one hard copy when you're having, even if it's a subcommittee, when you're meeting in subcommittee, there's one secretary who's making the changes to the actual document that everybody has voted upon. You're not having subsequent changes that just miraculously show up the next day.
Mr. Chairman?
David?
Yeah, I believe that there's currently, as I remember, there's currently actually a working group that will or is going to be formed with respect to looking at processes especially within the with regard to how the platform was created. So this probably could be, suggested maybe by a formal motion or resolution from
Well-
the Resolutions Committee to that work group.
Well, what I would say is, if you recall, because I had the discussion with Mark Ramsey, he made it, from the convention floor, the chairman on the entire convention floor said that we were gonna sit there and work through, this issue, that was gonna form a group to do that.
So I would suggest that be the proper venue for this discussion. I think if it comes down to a policy position of the party, if it's something that's codified in that form as a resolution, I think we can look at that, unless there's a motion to, for us to work with it in some way. I don't see an immediate way to do it. I think if there's a working group form, that may be the better venue for it. Any motion or discussion, or let's explore that and see if we can, and Mark, I'll ask you to reach out to the other members of the platform committee and get their thoughts and,
Well, do you want the chair, the Republican Party chairman to sit there and form the working group? Or is it gonna be through us?
I don't think it could be through us. I don't know that we've got that, unless it's a, reading narrowly here, policy position of the party.
I think we could just be kind of the catalyst to get the conversation started and get discussion going with the party chair, with Chairman Dickey.
Would you like to?
Anything
I'll
that
handle
would.
it.
I'm trying to think of a avenue for this, and one thought is a working group to explore a policy position with regard to platform organization.
Process.
That sounds reasonable.
I believe that's already in the works in my conversations with I believe with the chairman, so. That is a.
Oh, yeah, one of them listed from our August meeting was convention process improvement.
Who's on that working group?
I'm not sure.
Has it been appointed?
I don't even know if it has, but it was at least on the list that we got from the August meeting.
All right, well, maybe we just need to follow up with the chairman on that.
Let's follow up on the creation of that, because I think that sounds like they may have, that might be in their purview and not ours. All right.
Sounds like it's really a Google, what do you call it, Google Cloud or whatever. And the staff needs to work on that. So
But ultimately, it is a
It's
process.
it's a secure thing, it's a security thing. You can't, because there were times where there was question whether even folks who were sitting there at the table were the ones that were making changes, with all due respect.
And then we get put on there.
And they were
Yeah, you gotta have some
miraculously
control.
being changed.
Yeah.
Yeah, something like that.
Would you like the actual text and motion or just
Oh,
notes on the
yes,
side?
they were changed,
They were messing with it.
the actual text of the document.
So let's individually follow up on the creation of that work group, and if we're not seeing motion, if we're not seeing
All right.
movement on that, then we can consider something that this committee can do in December. I want to proceed now to new business, the next item on our agenda. There are two resolutions that we have language for, and I'll go in the order that they're listed on the agenda here. The first one is a resolution commemorating the 150th anniversary of the 14th Amendment to the United States Constitution. So there was an original form that you got, and I worked on some of the language and cleared it with original authors. We may want to move one or either of those formats, but I also wanted to give an opportunity for the author of the original resolution to discuss the genesis of this, and with the committee's indulgence, I would move that we give Mr. Clyde Lemon from Harris County Precinct Chair 5 minutes, since he came all the way from Houston to discuss his resolution. Is there any objection to that? All right, Mr. Lemon?
Good afternoon.
Oh, that's afternoon.
First, I want to thank the sponsors. They're not here my SREC committee woman is in Prague right now. So one of the things I said to her is, if there's a way to bring back some nice food, to bring me some food. I don't know if she can. And then the other sponsor is J.T. Evans. So I want to thank them. And I want to thank the chairman for giving us some guidance as we're going along, because I wasn't sure what your processes were. But I wanted to make sure I complied with them, because I've been involved with the party since 1988, and I know if you don't follow the process, it can trip you up. This, and I've given you my testimony there for people to look at after I'm finished. And if you note, I consider this a Republican, one of the early things of a Republican victory. And I heard someone earlier say something about our core beliefs. I consider the 14th Amendment expressing our core beliefs. And so I'd like to just kind of go through my testimony, and then I'll be happy to respond to any questions, etc. The 14th Amendment was passed primarily in response to actions being taken by some former Confederate states that enacted laws more commonly referred to as black codes. Other states such as Ohio, Illinois, and Michigan, as well as New York, enacted black codes to discourage ex-slaves from relocating from the South to their states. These laws restricted the freedom of ex-slaves. Some of the codes denied ex-slaves the right to vote, the right to bear arms, the right to work in certain vocations, the right to public education, freedom of assembly, etc. The term black codes is credited with being designated by Republicans that favor abolishing the black codes. And just as a side note, before they were black codes, they were called slave codes. Because remember, before the Civil War, there were rules that mandated how they should conduct themselves. The second reason for the 14th Amendment was to nullify the Dred Scott decision, which was decided by the Supreme Court in 1857, which held that a Negro could not be a citizen of the United States. The legislation to establish the 14th Amendment was passed by the 13th Congress in 1866, and I gave it a side the history book. I wanted to go back and look at the language, and if you want to go back, you can pull it up and actually see it, what they wrote, and then it finally passed. And then I list you the states there. Louisiana and South Carolina provided 3/4 needed for ratification. There were 28 states that actually, when they reached the number 28, then of course they brought it back in and said, okay, now it's law. Since the passage of the 14th Amendment since its passage, the 14th Amendment has been instrumental in ensuring that persons may select their vocations without government interference. It has outlawed segregation, ensure the property rights were protected from states and local governments in eminent domain cases, ensure that local governments afforded persons accused of crime notice and other due process provisions, ensure that local governments give citizens notice of tax levy and many other privileges and immunities. All of the above is the result of Republicans working to ensure that persons are truly afforded life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Therefore, based on the above, I request the Republican Party of Texas adopt the resolution commemorating the 150th anniversary of the passage of the 14th Amendment. And again, I thank you for your time, and I hope I might go over my 5 minutes. Just happy to respond to your questions.
Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Lennon?
I have no questions, counsel, but I certainly love the language where it establishes a new birth of freedom in our country. I agree with that. That's well done. Whoever wrote that in there is well done. So.
Thank you, sir, for.
And I've got a question. Are we gonna use this, are we encouraging people to use this to promote it in public events so that people can remember the history of the 14th Amendment and how it relates to the Republican Party?
That's the 2 primary reasons right there. And I'm not a genius. I would attend the Federal Bar Association in Houston had a workshop on the 14th Amendment. I completely forgot about it. So I got the invitation. You go and sit there, and they had a professor from South Texas, and there were federal judges and et cetera there. And it was a great discussion. And I'm sitting there thinking, my God, this professor just said the Republicans did this. I'm sitting there, wait a minute. Bing, bing, bing. Why the party said something? So that's how it came. But yes, this has a 2-pronged approach.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, so what I've got on the screen here is what I would consider non-substantive cleanup sort of stuff. I'll let you look at the first 3 whereases, and then I'll scroll down in about 30 seconds. Okay, moving, and just for simplicity, I struck resolved and just typed it out. I think I'm requesting a little bit of a change of clause that I did send to Clyde, and we worked on it, and he said that he was amenable to the suggestions. And mainly the change here was saying, instead of that all Republicans appointed in a passive, that we as a Republican Party of Texas call. And then moving to the second resolve, again, a similar switch from Republicans of Texas are encouraged to RPT encourages. I think the rest of it is identical. And then finally, it's going to be on.
Just show the new one down below.
Okay, there's the new one. This might be a little awkward, I'm just catching this here.
Yeah. Share and celebrate, not with an S.
Unless we're yeah, let's change that. Any objection to that?
No.
We actually don't have a motion on the floor, this is just the language that I was suggesting that we move in lieu of the exact original. So this,
History of remaining committed.
To the spirit and letter.
Version of, where you say Texas Republicans, you want to say Texans.
Texans, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Yes.
let's get a motion on the floor just to get this before the body, and then we can work on further wordsmithing. Does someone want to move the version as with all the strikeouts and all the underlines?
So moved.
Written books, motion,
Second.
is there a second?
What about the title?
All right, so the floor is now open for discussion or amendments. And I would just suggest that we kind of do it sequentially. So let's look at the first couple whereases first, and do what we need to do there if anybody has suggestions. So this is wordsmithing time.
Okay, Robert, you want to offer that?
Yeah. I thought we did it then.
Yeah, and I think Britton intended to move the motion with the change.
With
Correct.
the non-substantive changes.
Correct.
Okay, so floor is open for anything on these first whereases. You all ready to scroll down?
Yes.
Yep. Look at the last two whereases.
Virgil, I have a question.
Yes, Terry?
What is the difference between protected natural rights and national rights?
That was in
What is the
Clyde's
meaning of
original.
that?
Can we have Clyde address
A
that?
natural right is, God gives you certain rights.
Okay, got it.
A national right is vote, jury duty.
Okay, got it.
Coming from the government.
Yes.
And plus it's mentioned in the Constitution, so that's tied with the Constitution.
Is there a reason that we need the words elected and appointed instead of just Republican officials?
You want to suggest a possible change?
I'm just throwing it out there. I would say less is more.
Would y'all perhaps want to strike the 3 words?
Yeah.
Does that add clarity? All right, we have a motion to strike the 3 words in gray. Any discussion on striking it?
Sure.
David?
Even though we're saying Republican officials, there are elected officials and there are appointed officials. Sometimes, I don't know if you've noticed, that I have, that appointed officials tend to feel like they don't have as much accountability. And so I would say the resolution should remain elected and addressing appointed officials.
Plus it
Robert
referred.
and then Sam.
What I question though, was there appointed officials in 1868? I mean, that's a modern thing naudays, but I don't know about 1868.
There were probably some, I mean, there may not be the proliferation.
I don't know.
Sam?
Just to second what you said, since it happened in 1868, and if it said elected and appointed, we should stay with that language.
Well,
Mark?
and to your point, you know, they're appointed and elected. If you're taking out all three, you're not just looking at elected officials, you're saying Republican officials, period.
Correct.
I just want.
That would specify, yeah.
Whatever pleases
Just to offer another thought, I'm not really sure I want to go here. You could just say, whereas Republicans in 1868 ensured the adoption of the 14th Amendment, and just make it short and sweet, but I'm not sure if that's better or not.
So I'll consider that a secondary amendment.
Yes, yes. that's
So,
fine.
I'm gonna say it's germane, so, Marvin's secondary amendment would be to strike officials of and say Republicans
in
in.
1868.
And that reads even better.
That was good. Simple.
I'm gonna keep it simple.
No, I All right, so, that's Marvin's secondary amendment. I'm underlining N. All right, we'll vote on, is there any discussion on Marvin's secondary amendment? So, Bob?
The point I would make is that, I don't see the benefit of making this change. It seems to me to be more clear than the way it was previously written. We have lots of people that say they're Republicans. What does that mean? But if they are elected to office, they were office holders, isn't it better defined that the people who were representing others in the form of a republic? I don't think we just blow off the republic.
Well, another possibility was office holders, Republican office holders. You just made that word, but I don't know.
I mean, when you take it all the way down to that, I mean, that completely changes the meaning for me.
Okay.
Well, not everyone who spoke out on the issue, was an elected official in support of. There were many speakers.
It doesn't say.
What was, oh shucks, I'm trying to think of his name. The black man with the white hair. Frederick Douglass spoke very eloquently on the very subject of the 13th, 14th.
It doesn't say everyone.
But he was a Republican, that's all I'm saying.
Could we get a thought from Mr. Lemon?
Yes, please.
Actually, Frederick Douglass had been appointed, I think, he appointed marshal in Washington DC during that time.
That might be correct.
So
I
he was
know
appointed
he was at one time, but I'm not sure if he was holding that position at the time.
He was marshal or postmaster.
So going back to the intent, is there a benefit for us to say Republicans generally or elected and appointed officials specifically? Is it something that,
I looked at it from the standpoint that these were elected persons who, out of courage, because remember back home, some of them had their constituents who were saying, leave it alone. At least my reading of it, right? But they said, no, this is the right thing to do. They were elected, and they took some heat for it, you know, but they did it because they thought it was the right thing to do. Because there wasn't just a southern state issue, remember, there was some northern states too.
right?
And the Republicans were taking heat, leave it alone. The war's over, we don't want to have anything else to do with it, but this is the right thing to do. So I said they were kind of like John McCain, just do it because it's the right thing to do. Elected and appointed.
Thank you. David?
Going back to the title, we're commemorating and remembering and giving honor to those in this particular resolution, whereas to these particular people who in 1868. So I think leaving it is probably best.
Terry?
I'm in agreement with that sentiment because it says in 1868 ensured the adoption of the 14th Amendment. Not all Republicans, even if they supported it, were the ones that ensured the adoption of it. That was elected and appointed officials. Actually, it's elected. that ensured it.
Proxy for SREC.
Can I make a statement?
Any objection to proxy for SREC making a quick statement?
Hi, I'm proxy for Don Elliott, who is from SD 13. And I just have kind of a point of interest question here. When you read the Constitution, Amendment number 14 actually defines U.S. citizenship. It says all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens in the United States and of the state wherein they reside. And I know the Republican Party is at some point wanting to address how we define citizenship. It's actually Amendment number 15 that gave the right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of race, color, or previous condition of servitude. So I didn't know if this was to promote the fact that blacks were given the right to vote, which was actually Amendment 15, or why we're promoting Amendment 14, because that actually defines citizenship for the United States.
And it may be because it's anniversary.
It's the anniversary.
Of
It's
the,
recognizing
Of the
the
14th
anniversary.
but that defines it for all people born in the United States.
Are we ready for the question on the secondary amendment? Okay, so this is the question before us is Marvin's addition of S for Republican and the word in. All right, all those in favor of Marvin's addition say aye. All those opposed say no.
No.
The noes have it. Is there any other discussion on the main amendment? The main amendment is to strike elected and appointed officials. I guess that, not the right?
Right.
Okay, so are we voting to strike or not to strike?
A for vote would be to strike the words elected and appointed officials and adding the letter S to Republicans.
And just for some discussion on that, after hearing the intent of this, of those 3 words or 4 words, I'm going to withdraw my original language and move on from there. So.
Is there any objection to the withdrawal? All right, so the amendment goes away. Any other discussion on the 2 whereases at the end there? Let's proceed then to the first resolved. Any amendments on the first resolved? Hearing none. Any amendments on the second resolved? Any amendments to the final resolve? David?
Isn't the further be it resolved different than be it further resolved?
Yeah, any objection to
Yeah,
changing
go ahead, move
the
that
order
over.
to be it further resolved?
Yeah.
Make them match, yeah.
Yeah.
That's substantial.
And I think that the words remaining committed, I think commitment might, history of commitment to the spirit and letter of the 14th Amendment.
What's the suggestion?
I'm just throwing it out. It could either be remaining committed or it could just say history of commitment to the spirit and letter.
Agreed.
Taking 2 words and putting just 1 word in there, commitment.
Shortens it. Any objection to the shortening?
Well,
What was the exact?
History of commitment to, yes, right.
Okay, without objection. Mark?
I'm trying to think of how I want to say this, but we've got the Republican Party of Texas urges Texans to share. And what I'm thinking is, wouldn't we want to say something like Texans urge to share, to celebrate the Republican Party's history of commitment? You see where I'm coming from?
Say that again?
Yeah.
If in the beginning, you take the Republican Party off the front end of this thing and you put Republican Party, because it's the Republican Party history, and that we as Texans should be celebrating
Who's-
that the Republican Party.
Who would do the urging? What's the subject of the sentence?
We
We
urge
And who are we?
our Texans,
Texans
Texans
are-
Texans urging,
Well,
Texans
I mean,
urging.
it's coming from
It's
us
coming from
as
us.
SREC, part of the Republican Party, so that's why the.
We could say the State Republican Executive Committee.
Oh, there you go.
Good.
There you go.
Any objection to that?
Or,
We all said it at the same time.
That sounds great.
Minor
and
details.
I just think, just from my, just,
Now, it does break the Republican Party of Texas, the third resolve is slightly different. Historically, our resolutions have come from both the Republican Party of Texas and the State Republican Executive Committee, so that inconsistency is not, it's not
Not
bad.
unprecedented.
It's not unprecedented, thank you.
so, do I get a second?
Yeah, is there a second? Any discussion? All right, let's vote on Mark's amendment, changing Republican Party of Texas to State Republican Executive Committee and adding the word Republican. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no, and motion passes. All right, are there any further amendments to the resolution? Does anyone need me to scroll up? No. All right, are you ready for the question? Let's vote on final passage of the resolution commemorating, why is it underlining that?
Your cursor said it, but go ahead.
Thought it was misspelled or something.
Oh, well,
Don't worry about it.
we know more than Microsoft Word.
Yeah.
All right, all those in favor of final passage of this resolution say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no, and the motion carries. And shall I make in my report tomorrow that the resolution passed unanimously?
Yes.
Great. And Clyde, thank you for bringing this to us. I think it's a wonderful way to start the term off with something positive and reminding us of the important history of the party and natural rights and rights for all Americans. I want to proceed now to the second resolution authored by Bob Kessig, and I'll allow him to make the motion. You and I didn't have a chance to talk.
Right.
So, I don't know which version you wanna,
Yeah, I was gonna go with your version.
Okay.
Make it simple, and I always appreciate, someone who told me you always need a good editor, so I left my ego at home. I just kinda had a couple of other things that will clarify what you raised, but I'll do that at the appropriate time.
okay, so Bob Kessig is moving the resolution on the screen. The underlines and crossouts are changes from what you've got printed. So, and I'll give us opportunity to make sure we go through those carefully. So, I'm gonna allow Bob to speak on his resolution.
Probably many of you know that there's a Senate Select Committee that was formed to address, they termed it voter security. And there was a hearing, it's chaired by Brian Hughes, Senator, coincidentally from my district, Senate District 1, that's just a coincidence. And they had a hearing back in February of this year. And then also, a lot of this was stirred up and founded by Aaron Harris's work at Direct Action Texas that brought the attention about lots of, shall we say, irregularities with voting. I thought it was something really important as I dug into it and started to research it myself. And so I formed something I thought would really contribute. First of all, you see my old title there. I just want to make the point that this can be done as an executive branch action by the governor. And that's the way I presented the resolution. So it doesn't require legislation. It's basically getting the Secretary of State to specifically take action as far as acquiring the same database that they normally acquire. The procedure that Keith Ingram explained at the hearing, who was the top election official of the election division, the Secretary of State, when he presented what they do, he explained that they receive in the information from the counties, the people who are registering to vote, and his office acquires the DPS database for name, social security, date of birth, address, so the basic things. But my resolution specifies that they obviously in his presentation omit doing the same search in the same database for citizenship, where the information is there. If the person is in the DPS database at all. So, as it turns out, rather embarrassingly, in my, I believe it's in the third whereas, purely by the person's own volition who is called jury duty, who wants to get out of jury duty, says, I'm not a citizen. So they get out. So there was the 444 that I cited, this was in the testimony, was only from a couple of counties. So it's just really a small amount. The point I was going to make about.
There might be an amendment, you might propose, or somebody might propose an amendment to make that clarification.
Yeah, that's one clarification.
So we'll kind of put a star by that, just to come back to that.
So basically what I'm proposing is to get this more publicly known through our resolution, to make light of it, that a simple act, executive act of the governor to direct the Secretary of State to really first do a DPS query specifically for citizenship. And that way you don't have to do the others. So there's no cost involved here, there's no manpower thing here, this is what they normally do. What Mr. Ingram said in the hearing, which was 6 hours long, we need to break that up, I couldn't concentrate for 6 hours once. But at least you can watch it on video and stop it. He made the point that the election officials at the county level are supposed to investigate people. When I spoke to the lady that does it in Wood County where I live, she's been there for 8 years doing it. She's never heard of that such a thing. I guess it's probably, I guess what Mr. Ingram said may be correct, but that is not going out, I don't think, to the counties consistently. And to me, if they're already going into this database, it almost seems, I'm sorry to say, it almost seems deliberate that you're ignoring this. And that we should be ashamed of ourselves for people coming forward because they want to get out of jury duty.
By the way, the same is correct for noises. I think it's spread throughout the state.
Oh, yeah, I think this goes without saying that it's very widespread. And there isn't any reason, if you look at most people here have had more experience than I have at voter registration, the whole process, being precinct chairs maybe for a long time. But we do know from the registration card that you clearly state that whether you're a U.S. citizen or not by checking it. And then at the end, you swear, when you sign it, that you're swearing that you're a U.S. citizen, you haven't been convicted of felonies or so on and so forth. So if that's so important to be on the card, I would argue that why don't you check the database? Why don't you check the database? But it's apparent to me from listening to it, listening to everybody that was on there, that the bureaucracy at the SOS is doing it how they see it. And they're not going to do it from going to a hearing in front of a bunch of senators. But to me, I think they'd have to do it if the governor wants to address it. So that's my whole point.
Okay, so Mark, if I may ask a question for my own clarification. What you're saying is that folks who are registered to vote, and they get a jury card, you know, to say, show up for jury, or summons, to show up for jury duty, and then they sit there and say, well, I'm not really I'm not really a citizen. That's what you're saying, so you're saying that we should drop those 444 folks who?
No, I'm saying,
I'm just.
I'm saying that the database is there, the same that they're using for name, address, date of birth, maybe telephone number, I don't know, address, I guess was the other one. That's what he specifically said that they go in there for.
And I think that jury summons is an affidavit on penalty of perjury, if I'm not mistaken. I actually had a voter show up at my precinct who said, oh, I can vote, and I called it, and I said, you're not on the rolls, but we'll call the registrar. The registrar said, oh no, they said that they moved out of county on their jury summons, so they do track that in Harris County, I don't know if they do in.
I'm gonna just give it to you chronological.
All right.
So the person that works at your county
Yeah.
gets the new voter registration cards. They turn them in, they process them into the system, it gets uploaded into SOS.
Yep.
SOS is taking those new voters
Right.
and only going into the DPS database for their name, their address, their date of birth, social security number, ID number, tax ID number.
Right.
They're deliberately excluding going into the same database to check citizenship status.
I know.
And that's all this is about. That's what it's about. And instead of this, what I'm saying, if you watch the senators up there at this hearing, here they're set up to do nothing but taking a look at voter integrity. That's their sole select committee purpose. They're listening to them tell that this is it and like everything's fine, as if there's nothing wrong. And they just didn't ask the right questions. And if they would have asked this question, why don't you make this query, you know, we'd be further ahead.
Okay.
So, I just thought it was a heck of an opportunity for us to be effective because it doesn't require having to go through the legislative process.
Well, I just wish we'd verify everybody on the voter registration.
If I may.
Sam?
In Nueces County, I've checked this out quite a bit. It's worried me for a long time. I've been pretty involved in the whole election process. Number one, the county, I'm speaking for Nueces County. The people I talk to, positions of authority, admit they do not check for citizenship. All of this, they say, well, those guys do it.
That's exactly what I was told.
Everybody.
That's what I was
When people
told.
come
You're
in,
exactly right.
let's say they move into the county from out of the county or out of the state. They go to DPS to get their driver's license checked. There's a box you check. Yes, I would like to register to vote. And they think they just registered to vote. And it's not the case. That information gets passed on to the Secretary of State. Secretary of State's office sends eventually, it could be 6 months, sends it down to the county clerk. Just that those people want to register to vote. There's no indication of whether they're a citizen.
Just, I want to just jump in, we've got 22 minutes left, so we'll return to Sam.
Respectfully, then the other point I want to make is this thing about 444 voters declared that they're not citizens in order to get off the jury duty. They should not be dropped because they said that. They should be checked to see if they're citizens. Because it's a constitutional right to vote if you're a citizen.
Which is what he's saying,
I didn't say that.
Yeah.
I didn't say that.
Right, that's all I'm saying, is don't just blindly take them off the rolls, but.
He's saying go back to the database.
Check to the.
Yeah, the reason why-
Yeah, let's go one at a time, please.
The reason why I put that in there was to say how shameful it is if that's how it comes to us.
Right.
That we are completely bypassing any kind of check at the time of registration. So now what about this vast number of people in the box? The last resolve addresses to a great extent to the degree. Now, I didn't make a stipulation of how many there are, but it asks for some response from the Attorney General's office, because they have studied this. They have worked on this. And for those that want to hear the number that I heard that the Attorney General has come up with is 280,000 that are in the DPS database that are non-citizens. So that's the level of the problem statewide already. In addition to that, there is a much larger number that aren't even in the DPS database at all, that are registered to vote today. That number is about 4 million. And that's why this last resolve was here, to put pressure on them to say, come forward and tell us how bad it is, because you know that's a political thing, right?
Okay.
It gets
So I
embarrassing.
recognize this Robert Casillas.
Yes, one, I want to speak to support you, but, my experience is this, there's a lady, Melissa Conway, I think she's a committee woman from SB 17. Here prior to our special election, Bear County is corrupt, probably worse than Wes's. She bought a gentleman, Alan Vera, I think his name, from Harris County, and he presented some poll watch training, but he's involved in lawsuits, and there's thousands in Harris County and they're literally cheating. Yeah, they check it, but they're not citizens.
Yes, sir.
So I support that, but I really think there needs to be, something else to fix the problem, because, that's not gonna fix the problem. If they start, but.
Yes, Robert, I agree, but I kept this specifically to this one part because we have lots of other things, and Mr. Vera gave a very great presentation at that hearing
He's awesome.
about it. And then there's also the thing about the mail ballots, which is another whole thing, but I wanted to keep it specific to one simple thing to argue one thing at a time.
Since we've got 19 minutes, I think we ought to start looking at language here and making sure that if it's the will of the body to get the resolution moving forward, so.
Do you have any other changes further down in the resolution, Virgil?
Can we, if there's no objection, I'd like to go just clause paragraph by paragraph, and that way we can move quickly. Let's look at the first one, the title in the first one. Anything on that? Title and the first whereas. Okay, moving to the second whereas. And I have a question mark in there.
Yes, I got an answer for you. This is a quote from this point forward. After confirm that quote, this is what the man said.
Okay, perfect.
Oh.
That makes it a lot better.
Yes, how amazing.
And this is an interesting footnote. My mom is originally from Starr County, so I know well what goes on there. Not all of it is always legal.
This is just one aspect of the problem, for a better word.
Okay. Registrations are.
Well, I guess I have to check out Starr County.
So Robert is, should have.
Yeah.
Let me strike that. And he's suggesting wording here, just one aspect of the problem.
I think that satisfies kind of what you were looking for.
All right, so Robert has a motion on the third whereas, and without objection, we did the quotes on the second whereas. We've got wording being considered now on the third whereas, just one aspect of the problem. Any discussion on that? Sam, you have the floor.
Right. On the third whereas, WFAA should be written out. Does everybody know what WFAA is?
You're absolutely correct.
Okay.
You're
Is
absolutely.
it a TV? Is it a web outlet?
It's Channel 8 and Dallas.
It's Channel 8 television.
As we
ABC
say,
affiliate.
ABC in Dallas?
Yes.
Dallas,
ABC station,
There you go.
station,
Station.
WFAA.
You want to capitalize station or no? Any objection to those words?
It's
No.
TV, television, not radio.
ABC television station.
Yeah.
All right, any other, we took those out of order. Talking now about the just one aspect of the problem wording. Any objection to that? Britain is making a face.
Just one aspect of the problem.
Instead of the tip of the
No, yeah,
iceberg.
which is better. Let's give me 15 seconds.
Yeah, okay.
Anybody have any other way to say that?
We want to say that, like, I think Bob is trying to convey, if I'm not mistaken, that the 444 is a small number of.
Oh, right, no, I understand. Is there a different way to say it is all? I'm just trying to give someone access to the property. Simply when
Did you
it's-
say, Bob, that they were just from 2 counties?
Yes, that's my understanding.
Could we say, and those 444 voter registrations
We're for home.
Why don't you just,
were from only 2 counties?
why don't you put that right after the 444 voters? The voter registrations of
only
444 voters in only 2 counties.
From only
From-
2 of Texas's 254 counties?
Oh,
Texas apostrophe.
Texas possibly after.
Oh, I like that.
That's non.
That's great.
And
And then
we
remove-
want to kill the language later, so, you want to kill everything to the end of the whereas?
I would, yes.
A motion to kill that, any discussion, Mark Dunham?
I'll make that motion to strike that and then just cut it off at jury duty.
Okay, discussion on the strike? All those in favor of the strike, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say no. All right, David?
Back up in the previous whereas, we have the 229th Judicial District Attorney.
So I looked it up, cause I remember that Stark County was in a multi-county judicial district, so it's 3 counties.
That's not.
So he's elected by 3 counties.
So they have the 229th.
District attorney for the 3 counties.
Multiple counties.
Got it.
I was gonna say, in defense of the original language, at the hearing, when Mr. Escobar was introduced, he was just introduced as, Stark County AG. So that's why I just repeated what they.
And I'm okay
Yeah.
with either, the precision is,
Yeah, that's okay.
The more precise, the better.
and then later on we said in Stark County,
Yeah,
so
you've got it covered.
it's referenced. Are we done with the 3rd whereas?
Hold on.
Proceeding to the 4th whereas. And we had referenced Secretary of State already, so I cut some ink out of there.
Right.
But then I added some right here, Texas Department of Public Safety. Other suggestions?
I would just take out the word already there, I would just say available right there.
Okay, we have a motion to strike the word. Any discussion? All those in favor of striking say aye. Those opposed say no. Okay, moving down, unless there's anything else, moving to the first resolve. The language underlined.
Can anybody suggest any language that's similar to the words cracking down?
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm a stickler for this stuff.
Well, I'm trying to butter up.
No, it sounds great. No, I like it. I like it. I'm doing it. Yeah, I like it.
I want to do it.
Pretty descriptive, actually.
It is pretty descriptive.
What we want done.
Say enforcement. Maybe not. Maybe
Or-
say. Maybe say.
Sam?
Enforcement or quality, some sort of quality control.
Strong record of enforcement.
If you keep cracking down, you can of cracking down on, right? Of cracking
Strong
down.
record
I agree.
of cracking
Cracking
down.
down.
Any objections to saying of cracking down instead of on?
No.
Okay, back to the cracking down phrasing.
Put the crack down.
I think it sells better to the governor.
Hey, we want to make sure we're supporting our nominee for governor.
You know, cracking down does have a kind of a good, I mean, the word,
Yeah.
the word abolish wouldn't have the same oomph as a cracking. Yeah.
The governor might like it.
Okay, so no motion on cracking down.
No matter who our audience is here, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Chairman,
He's
you have
real in that.
Anything else on, no, I like cracking down.
Crack down.
Moving down to the.
Let's go crack down some. That's my chairman.
Let's see, Robert.
Oh, it's a crack down.
Administrative order, is that the proper term, or executive order? I don't know what the governor uses, executive order.
Anyone help us on that?
I don't.
And then, if no one can help help us on that, Chair recognizes Sam Dalton.
I just want to complicate matters a little bit. I don't know if you all are aware, but apparently in the election code, if people have not voted at all for several election cycles, they can be dropped from the roll.
Well, they can be,
They
but
can.
there's a bad history of that
Now,
actually.
in Nueces County, to kind of
That's why
said,
there's so many.
we're trying not to be corrupt,
And,
and we are dropping those people from the rolls.
Bob, I don't think your resolution speaks to that, does it?
No.
The other thing I want to point out is we probably have, what, 20 million registered voters in the state, give or take. Wow, that's a big number to go back and check
Well,
as to whether or not they're citizens.
what,
Not that we shouldn't do
Who
it.
cares how many there are?
what,
Well,
well,
you made the point, that it wouldn't cost anything. It would cost something, because human resources, you know.
No, wait a minute. You're only talking about the input. What's it costing us now?
Well,
People are donating to,
Well, I
people are
agree.
donating
I
money to
agree with
candidates?
the direction you wanna go, I'm just saying,
No.
there is a cost to straighten this problem out.
No.
But it should
Okay,
start.
Sam, has
There's a
floor.
cost in not straightening it. That's what I'm
I
saying.
agree. No, I'm not speaking against straightening it out.
Okay, Bob, you have the floor.
I just was gonna say, I wasn't going into the thing about the total, the thing about people dying and stuff.
Okay, any motions on the therefore be it resolved, cracking down? Clause,
Just one last question.
Nita, and then Britton.
There was a question on whether it's administrative or a executive
Yeah,
order.
there you go.
And what about, and I don't know the answer to that. What about if we do //?
Or say or?
Or, yeah, there you go, or executive order, whichever would be more appropriate.
Does someone know whether there's a distinction there? So Nita has an amendment to add or executive, correct?
Correct.
I think the distinction is the governor's doing the executive and some staffer might be doing the administrative.
So there may be a difference.
There may be a difference.
Everything that I'm looking at right now
Anything-
shows the governor making executive
Okay,
orders.
that's what I thought, I don't have to.
So via executive order?
Yes.
Well, you
So I
wanna
can amend
blame,
my motion to say change administrative to executive.
I wanna blame Virgil on that, cause he knocked out my executive up
Oh,
there in
did
the
I?
title, in the title.
Oh, okay. So let me clarify Nita's motion. What are you, can
I
you read?
said, from what Linda said at the other end of the table, is
That was
I would
his first
amend
mistake.
to strike
Only
administrative and just put executive.
All right, we have, she's altering her initial motion, so is there any objection to her changing her amendment?
No.
Okay, so the amendment on the floor is to change administrative to executive. Discussion, David?
Mr. Chair, I would almost make it second and make it another amendment, just to mandate that the SOS perform the line check. In other words, let's not have to figure out what kind of an order he's gonna use.
I had mandate.
Mandate.
I had mandate.
No, so,
But-
I'm
so,
saying,
Take
what
out
I'm
the next
saying
few
is
words.
take out executive or administrative, we're not gonna, we don't need to define the vehicle.
oh, I see what you're saying.
To
So
mandate
Just
that.
that he would mandate that the SOS perform, just eliminate the.
Yeah.
all right, so I will consider that a secondary amendment. Is there any discussion on the secondary amendment? All right, let's vote on that. All those in favor of striking via all that to order, everything in gray, to mandate, and it would read, to mandate that the SOS perform if passed. All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. That goes away?
Shorter is better.
And I've got one more, guys, if I could.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'll make a motion to change it to supporting reform to ensure election integrity to ensuring election integrity reform. Supporting,
To ensuring.
Starting where?
voting
Supporting-
and supporting election.
So are you cutting supporting as well?
No, supporting is good. I was gonna say simply
Supporting election integrity
reform.
reform. So it would read, the amendment would read, therefore be it resolved that the State Republican Executive Committee calls on Governor Greg Abbott, who has a strong record of cracking down on illegal voting and supporting election integrity reform, to mandate ...
Yes.
Correct.
All right, any discussion on the amendment? On the amendment. All right, all those in favor of the amendment say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. Robert, you have the floor.
If on the next resolve, the 1 2/3 sentence, upon the office of the Attorney General to release the data, but I'd like to add, to enforce existing laws.
Okay, where do you want to put that?
He's saying the purpose of it, he's saying the purpose would be for them to enforce existing law.
Where would you like to put the words?
To release the data,
Yeah, after Attorney General to enforce existing laws and strike release the data.
Okay, so we would strike to release the data and replace it with to enforce existing laws. Any
Well,
discussion on that?
Okay, I'll play devil's advocate. Here's a thought. As important as it is to scrub that data and everything else, what's also important, because what do you hear the Democrats say?
It's not a big
There's
problem.
no
Yeah.
election there's no problem, So here you would have formally saying, yes, we have found,
The size of the
you know,
problem.
and how big the problem exactly is.
Mr. Chair.
And I think that is important as finding and scrubbing it
Election laws,
in the first place.
Robert, go ahead.
existing election laws.
Yep.
Okay, any objection to his changing his amendment?
yeah,
So there is objection, so that would have to be done as a secondary amendment. We're doing a lot of that today. So we have a secondary amendment to add the word election. So the motion on the floor, is there any discussion to adding the word election to the primary amendment? Okay, let's vote. On just the amendment to add the word election, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. The
No.
word is added to the primary amendment. So the amendment on the floor now is to enforce existing election laws, replacing to release the data. Any other discussion on that? And I'll admit, I am rushing us a little bit here. We're coming up against the 4 o'clock, but Bob, and then Terry, and then Nita.
Okay, the purpose of having to release the data is for our existing government to show that there's a problem, like Mr. Dunham was saying. There's lots of opposition, says there's no problem. There's a guy there named Oldman that says we don't have a voter fraud problem. Right there in front of,
And to continue to support
Hold on,
my.
Terry's
sorry.
next, and then Nita, and then we'll go to Mark.
I expressed the numbers to you when I was up in front about those that are maybe green card or somebody that are in the database but they're not citizens, 280,000, and then 4 million that are not in the database at all. And so I'm saying that if we throw that out, I mean, to ask them to enforce existing laws when we already have these problems, saying by dictating to enforce the laws. I want exposure to enforce the laws, not a dictation by us.
Okay, Terry, you're next.
Okay, well, I'm just kind of throwing this thought out there, I'm not sure what's in the amendment, but, enforce existing election laws, is that clear as far as ballot security? I mean, enforce existing election laws and ballot security measures, I don't know. Yeah, I'm just kind of like wondering if
You wanna-
election laws is so broad.
You wanna
ballot
hold
security-
on to the thought and see
Okay.
how we dispose of the amendment?
Okay,
Nita, you chair recognizes Nita.
Okay.
Yeah.
What, and I don't know, Virgil, I am not a pro engineering person, so slap me if I'm doing something wrong. Okay, why can we not do to release the data and to enforce the existing?
We could do that.
Yes.
I would,
And if I need to make a motion for a secondary amendment, I
so
can do that.
that's, I'll consider that your motion.
Okay,
So Nita's motion is to unstrike to release the data and add and to enforce existing election laws. She's bringing the two together.
I
Any
can say that.
any discussion on that?
I agree. Sounds good.
Okay, let's proceed to a vote on Nita's amendment. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. Opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. And now it becomes, give me a second here. That's what we've got now.
Gotta do one last one here if I could. In the word make in the second line, I would like declare. Right there.
All right, we have a motion to strike make and substitute declare. Any discussion on that?
I think declare is the right word.
All right, all those in favor of substituting declare for make say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. Any other motions on the last resolve? Is there another resolve now?
And would you all like to have, instead of their votes, our votes?
Ooh.
Yes.
Any objection to the amendment? Did I, yeah.
That Texans, not can have, Texans have confidence that our votes are legally counted.
Any objection to striking can?
And I'm done, sorry.
No, that's great. I love that.
Yeah, attorney.
I think Bert
I like being not the only one to make the little tiny nitpicky motions.
I think it's got tired, Bert.
Well, it's all.
It's got tired, you were the end.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
All right.
votes is Texas.
Let's keep focus here for another second.
Ask the question.
Looking at the whole resolution, is there anything else?
Okay, I have a question about the very end, again, like you said, our votes, this is the Republican Party, so we're not questioning our votes, but their votes. I mean, the difference.
Texans.
Texans.
Texans have confidence, our votes, so the our is referring to.
We're including us in the Texans.
Not
is my
just the
understanding by
Republican Party.
reading of that.
Okay, yeah.
All right, Terry.
I just wanted to throw that out there again. I just want to make sure election laws are encompassing of ballot security measures. I don't know if we need to put anything in there about ballot security to make that
More restrictive?
clear or restrictive, or do we not want to be restrictive? I'm not making an emotion right now. I just kind of wanted to.
Well, Robert, that was my point of adding elections, because that's what we're focused
Okay.
on. So, I mean, I'm not objecting to that.
And I think Terry was suggesting that we wouldn't be speaking to all election laws, but more narrowly to certain types of election laws. Am I framing your
Yeah, does
your
that make
question
it
correctly?
does that make this resolution weaker by adding ballot
That's-
security?
That would be up for the body to decide. If someone has a motion that would speak to that, or would be open to that.
You know, ballot security is wild and woolly in the mail-in ballot thing. But that's another whole.
Other sections.
Yeah,
I was deliberately trying to stay away from the others,
and be more broad, okay.
and not be broad, to be just to this topic.
This is a very good.
Okay, is there any other debate on the resolution as amended? Let's proceed to a vote. I'm gonna run over time, I apologize. I do wanna address the pro-life suggestions before we adjourn, so, are we ready for the question?
Yes.
All right, all those in favor of the amendment, of the resolution on protecting the right of citizens to vote as amended, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. Can my report reflect that it's unanimous?
Yes.
Yes.
Wonderful. Okay, the last thing I had on the agenda was, it actually came from the chair. And if you'll indulge me for just a second here. Chairman Dickey here's the plank in question. The Republican Party of Texas should provide financial support only to those candidates who support the right to life planks. I pulled out the raw vote for you. I think it was an unweighted, or included the abstention, so that may not be that accurate, but it should be pretty close to that. So it is weighted, but it includes abstentions. And then the request from Chairman Dickey, and I'm sorry to rush here, but we are over time. This is the charge that he said at the August meeting. This was his oral statement to us. And he has asked us to be ready to report on it at the September meeting. It might be appropriate, and Ashley was the only one who bid on this. She and I had a conversation about this, and I wanted to give her just a brief moment to talk about some of the consideration.
Well, I
think it's most of what you have already put up there. When it says the pro-life planks, we don't have a pro-life section. We have several planks within state rights, health and human services, and you can probably go back and find some more. We also have our principle. We also have a legislative priority, which actually has 3 different sections in that one priority. So I think this is definitely going to have to maybe either have another, I don't know, committee, I don't know if that's the correct word or not, work group or.
And I wanted to suggest to the committee, and I didn't know that we'd run out of time on this. I thought we might have 30 minutes to talk about this today and maybe avoid having to do this. But I want to be able to say that we did consider this and that we took action on it. So I might suggest to the committee the formation of a subcommittee, and I use the formal subcommittee and not a working group because I think we may need input on this, and I think it would be good to do it with rules requirements and have an open
For the rules
telephone.
too, I do have a suggested resolution, but according to the rules of time, it would be, we can discuss it anyway, so.
So the suggestion that I'm offering to you is the creation of a subcommittee. Does anyone want to move to that effect?
Mark Dunwell made that motion.
And any parameters to that? How many? Volunteers? Okay, so let's do that. Let's see how many volunteers we have, and then we can formalize the motion. So this is, we're in informal consideration right now. I would like Ashley to be on the committee. I talked to Jason Ross. He's not here. His punishment for not being here is...
I think he's on rolls.
Make sure you put that in the rules.
Yeah, he's on rolls.
And I don't want to make light. I don't mean to make light of this. This is super important. I'm just picking on Jason here. So, he and I spoke on it this morning, and he said that if he has time, he would be interested in. So, who else would like to be on it?
I'll be on it.
Terry Leo. I'm gonna ask that I be on there too. I guess I can appoint myself.
Sure.
Anybody else? Can we get a 5th so that it's an odd number?
I'll do it.
There you go.
Well, let's do both. Let's do 7.
Let's do
Trip Bryant, Robert Macias. One more. I need one more. Who else isn't here?
Are you serious?
I wonder if Pastor Groden would want to be on that.
Yeah.
Let's
Chapter and verse.
In fact, I'm sure he'll probably force himself onto that.
So Pastor Groden, and then Debbie Terry is not here. I know Debbie Terry,
That's
pro-life
a very-
causes are very important to her.
She's gonna be coming in tonight.
It should be here in a minute.
Anybody else? And we do have an even number again, but I'm okay with that if y'all are okay with that.
Support.
Okay, so the motion on the floor, if I'm articulating it correctly, is, whose motion was it? Was it Ashley? It was Mark's.
It was Mark.
Mark's motion, to create a subcommittee to report in December on, the pro-life policy possibilities. And it would include the following members: Ashley Sellers, Jason Ross, Terry Leo, Virgil Cruz, Trip Bryant, Robert Casillas, Stephen Broden, and Debbie Terry. With, I'm gonna say with, anyone want to chair that?
Oh.
Yeah,
I just got a point of inquiry.
go ahead.
What is the name of the subcommittee?
We will call it
Subcommittee.
the Financial Support, we can call it the Plank 332 Subcommittee. We want to be real
There
vague.
you go.
Alright.
This is the Plank 332 Subcommittee. Ashley, would you like to chair it?
She would.
Thank you, Sure.
All right, in this motion I made, Ashley is chair. Okay.
Congratulations.
I don't believe that we need to ratify it,
That
but
means that up to the secretary.
I would like the, well, let's recognize Chairman Dickey for maybe kicking us out of the room here. But
No, I came to sit in for a minute if that's okay.
so we've passed 2 resolutions and we're considering Plank 332 at this moment.
Awesome.
So we,
32
the,
on one, I think. Oh, no.
what are you looking at?
Oh, never mind. I see it now.
So Chairman walks in just as we're quoting him here. I'm gonna ask for y'all's approval on this, just so that it's ratified. So the, Mark Dunham's motion is the creation of a subcommittee with Ashley Sellers as chair of the subcommittee. So we will be subject to reporting requirements and notice requirements. Let's do this after the November election, because we need to spend all of our time on election, and then this will be the important thing that we take up in December. So we've got the 8 people previously named. Any discussion on the motion? Is there a second? We've got one. Any other questions?
Where'd
Let's.
you gonna try to
Point
get
of
it?
information, we have 8, do we wanna make that an
That was
odd
my
number?
question, yeah.
Cause 8 is not gonna be.
If someone would like to add a 9th person,
Well,
are you trying to pull yourself off?
Or someone will withdraw, no, it's
well,
easy.
even if not, I mean, the chair could always be the split or not.
This is true. And anyone in this committee, anyone on the SREC, and any invited guests can participate in this discussion. So this is not just restricted to these, 7 or 8 people. All right, so let's vote on the motion. If there's no other commentary, all those in favor of the creation of a Plank 332 subcommittee say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. And can my report reflect that it was unanimous?
Yes.
All right, is there any, and I'm going to allow Mr. Chair to address us briefly if he'd like to.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay.
I just have a point of information, so.
Okay, well, I just want to say a couple of things I've been saying to each of the committees all day today. So those of you who were in a couple other committees, forgive me for repeating myself. But I want to be really clear for everybody. Remember that the point of the committee is to make decisions and recommendations. And when you're making recommendations, that's either recommendations to the staff and me, or the recommendations to the body of the SREC. And so as you do your work, that's your point, is make those decisions, recommendations. If there are projects that you want to see done, which probably won't come out of this committee so much, but if there are projects, that's what a working group's for. Fire off a working group, and by all means, be inclusive in those. Encourage people who aren't SREC members to be on it. Don't feel like you guys have to do all of the heavy lifting yourself. In fact, I would argue that if you are trying to do all that heavy lifting yourself, you're probably not going to be nearly as successful. So I would encourage that. The other thing I would encourage you to do is don't feel restricted by the pace of the standard quarterly SREC meetings. It makes sense that we have to have quarterly meetings. It's a little effort to get here from some parts of the state. In fact, it's a whole lot of effort to get here from some parts of the state. It makes sense because our meetings have to be in person, and it involves people coming from all over the state. We really can only do quarterly, but we have the officials committee, and the point of them is to make decisions and keep business flowing in between those quarterly meetings. So don't at all restrict yourself to the pace of the quarterly meetings. If there's stuff that you guys want to pass or need to do, call your phone meeting. That's the point of those things. Call your phone meeting, have your phone meeting, and then report it up to the officials committee, and we can keep things going and we can keep things moving. We don't have to wait for the quarterly things. And the last thing I would suggest is respect each other's time and make sure that you get the best input you can possibly get by doing as much pre-work as you can possibly do, especially for a phone meeting. It is really, really useful if you've already given it a best shot at your framing of the wording and already distributed it so people can start to think about it, give you their input. You can have the best possible result before you even get on the phone. So I would strongly recommend that you do that. Respect each other's time and the quality of each other's input. You got great fellow committee members. Take advantage of that.
Thank you.
God bless you guys.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
since we have our chairman here, I think this would be a good time to sit there and discuss the SOP issue that we were talking about with the platform.
Yeah, could we maybe adjourn to, I know there are people who have to get to other committee meetings and address that outside of motion. Is there any other, Terry
I
had
just
a
have a point
point.
of information, being new, so the resolutions that we passed here will be, delivered to the committee of the whole tomorrow, is that correct?
Correct. So I will deliver the report with the 2 resolutions. I'm gonna, after CRC adjourns, I will be available. Terry, are you available in about an hour and a half or so?
Yes.
To just review what I send?
Yeah. and then-
Anybody else is welcome to join us under the authority given under non-substantive editing.
Will it be sent to us electronically?
And, that may be a personal question.
Oh, okay.
It's a Brandon question. I don't know that it will be, and we'll see on that. I'll find out. Any other business before the committee?
Apparently not.
All right, I'll take that as a motion to adjourn. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no.
Unanimously.
That's called losing your committee.
Yeah, so thanks for coming. Appreciate it a lot.
Oh, great to meet you. Congrats on the SB19. Oh, yeah. Great to have you.
I know her name. I'm not sure. I mean, I don't know if she's still holding it on, but.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Have you seen?
Oh, okay.